The citizenship crisis has just claimed its sixth scalp, with Senate President, Liberal Stephen Parry, falling on his sword after confirming he is a dual British citizen.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And just when you thought the crisis was over, it wasn't. And Sky's political editor David Spears was asking the question on everyone's lips.
Plenty of people are saying we surely now need an audit of all MPs. Is Stephen Parry really going to be the last dual citizen amongst them?
Probably not, is the answer. But, as Liberal MP Craig Kelly told Sky, until politicians agree to an audit, we can expect the media to keep on digging.
The reality is that members of the media and the investigative journalists will be going through everyone's background, everyone's family record with a fine-tooth comb. So there's an informal audit going on, done by the media, that will go on for weeks and for months.
And 2 days later, The Australian ran this front-page audit of Cabinet Minister Josh Frydenberg.
Hungry for answers, Frydenberg joins citizenship fiasco.
Hungarian maize. The child of a Hungarian citizen shall become a Hungarian citizen by birth.
The suggestion that Frydenberg could be a Hungarian citizen despite being born in Australia was met with an angry response.
My mother came to Australia from war-torn Europe after the Holocaust, post-war, and was deemed to be a stateless person. It is completely absurd.
And the Treasurer Scott Morrison and Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull were soon laying into the media for running a Salem-style witch hunt.
We must not allow ourselves to be dragged into a sort of lynch mob, witch hunt, trial by innuendo and denunciation.
But with Labor and the government doing their damnedest to avoid an audit that would settle the matter, there is no reason why the media should stop seeking answers. Or refrain from taking our political leaders to task, as the Daily Telegraph did with this memorable front page.
The Cone of Connivers.
Australians are demanding an end to the citizenship fiasco. These two blokes refuse to listen.
And the man who's been most damaged by all of this, of course, is Malcolm Turnbull, with the crisis over MP's citizenship morphing rapidly into a crisis over his leadership. And last week, just about every political journalist and columnist was asking not if, but when he should go.
Do you think it would be a mistake to knife Malcolm Turnbull before the next election?
Of course, commentators like Andrew Bolt, Peter Credlin, Ray Hadley and Alan Jones have been saying for months that Turnbull cannot survive. But if there was one moment that pushed others to agree, it was the High Court decision 10 days ago to chuck Barnaby Joyce and 4 senators out of Parliament, which had veteran numbers man Graham Richardson declaring,
"This bloke's had it, he's finished, he's gone, he's done and he's dusted."
Oh, that's bold.
No, but it's also true.
By the end of last week, everyone was in furious agreement, with Sky's Paul Murray broadcasting from a pub in Queensland, summing it up.
The great conversation at the moment is, of course, who's going to replace Malcolm Turnbull. They want to pretend it's not going to happen, but it is.
And fellow panellist and former Liberal MP Gary Hardgrave needed no convincing that Turnbull is toast.
I think Malcolm Turnbull knows he's for the high jump. You look at his face. This is the gutted out Malcolm Turnbull look we're seeing at the moment. His days are numbered. He knows it.
Next day, it was the Australians' turn to write him down, with political editor Simon Benson pronouncing,
PM's hold on job no longer guaranteed. Simmering tribal hostilities have become open warfare. Unity is broken.
And naturally, talk was turning to who would replace him, with the Telegraph's political editor Sherry Markson touting Julie Bishop, and Fairfax's Catherine McGregor, an old friend of Tony Abbott, declaring in her new column for the Herald and Age,
Julie Bishop could lead Liberals to victory at the next election.
And then delivering the Prime Minister's political death sentence.
Despite his abundant talents and vaulting self-belief, Turnbull's political career seems to be drifting towards final, ignominious failure. The reckoning cannot be far off.
So, will it happen? Who knows? But the noise is deafening. And now to the other big story of the week, at least in some sections of the media. And no, not Sophie Monk. We're talking about the developing crisis on Manus Island.
PNG's police commissioner has warned locals not to interfere with the transfer of refugees. He says reinforcements have already been flown to the island and more are on standby if required. Liam Fox, ABC News, Manus Island.
That was the tense situation on Manus before the detention centre was closed last Tuesday. But the 600 inmates were not transferred to new accommodation after all, as the ABC was soon reporting.
Despite the centre's closure, the men are determined to stay. They've started collecting water in rubbish bins.
And thus began a nasty standoff. 600 men with no running water, no power and no food. And with tensions rising and fears of what might happen, international media like CNN and The Washington Post were all over the story. But the ABC's Liam Fox still had exclusive TV footage from inside the centre, the first in years, because he was the only Australian or foreign journalist there when it shut down.
This is the rooms. This is our rooms.
Of course, there were other voices being heard from Manus, like Kate Schutze from Amnesty International.
We're very concerned about what might happen today and the increased risks of violence around the proposed closure of the centre.
And Green Senator Nick McKim also popped up in several places with dramatic comments about the dangers asylum seekers were facing.
They're being left at the mercy of the Papua New Guinea Navy, who earlier this year attacked the centre with submachine guns and shotguns and tried to ram through the gates so they could attack and kill detainees. I mean, it's a humanitarian crisis unfolding at Australia's hands.
But why were most of the professional media not there to show us what's happening and bring us the facts? They knew the centre was closing because the announcement was made last year and the date was confirmed 5 months ago. And with claims like this from one of the asylum seekers, who's himself a journalist, you'd think the media would want to be there.
The police already they beat some of the refugees, and the local people they attack the refugees and rob them. And this place is not a safe place.
That claim is denied by Immigration Minister Peter Dutton, but all the more reason to check it out. Yet commercial TV pretty much chose to ignore the Manus story, even though both 7 and 9 got reporters and crews at considerable expense to Bogotá in Colombia for the sentencing of Australian drug mule Cassie Sainsbury. Surely a much less important story. However, it has to be said, those who tried to get to Manus did find it a challenge. News Corp's Rory Callanan and photographer Brian Cassie finally got onto the island late on Wednesday, apparently on a tourist visa, and then hitched a boat ride to the detention centre.
For 2 days, the Australian had sought to visit the shut-down detention centre, but had been turned away from the gates. Inside the centre, there was significant hardship and a mood of desperation. Some of the men have mental problems. They tugged constantly at us, begging for medicine.
SBS also wanted to send a reporter, but applied for a visa 6 weeks ago and did not get approval. While Fairfax Media covered the story extensively, but had no one on the island. Yet they too had a reporter in Bogotá. When we asked them why no one was on Manus, we got this blunt response.
Any suggestion that we aren't giving it the appropriate coverage is drivel. And to underline it, if it ever needed it, our assigned photographer was refused entry on Friday.
So who is that? Freelancer Matthew Abbott, who was prevented from entering PNG when he applied for a visa at Port Moresby Airport. So what happened? Well, Abbott believes it was the Australian government, not PNG, that blocked his entry, after he published these photographs last year of asylum seekers who'd been beaten up by locals. Abbott told Media Watch,
"The Australian government put me on a watch list. Everything on Manus is controlled by the Australian government. I was also told that I had been involved in publishing disruptive material from Manus in the past."
We put Abbott's claim to the Department of Immigration and Border Protection, which told us curtly,
"Entry to PNG is a matter for PNG authorities."
That may well be true, but it's something that many in the media find hard to believe. But now, let's throw the switch to vaudeville and to the hidden danger in our midst. And this story, as they say, will shock and surprise you.
Depending where you live, you might have noticed a boom in share bikes. You see banks of bikes parked around the place that you can hire short term. Another new player is going to enter the field this week, putting thousands more bicycles into circulation. But they're creating a whole range of issues, from pollution and vandalism to privacy concerns.
Yes, but that's not all. As Miranda Devine sensationally warned her Sunday Telegraph readers last week,
city share bikes are a terrorist's best friend.
Amazing, eh? Devine's never been a fan of bikes or of those who ride them. Back in 2014, she blamed the death of a cyclist in Sydney's Neutral Bay on an aggressive new entitlement mentality fostered by the bicycle lobby. And a few months later, she was hacking into Sydney's Lord Mayor, Clover Moore, for the bike lanes she was building.
Clover's deluded death wish list for Sydney's cyclists. They are like Israel's settlers, ideologically driven to colonise ever more dangerous territory.
But with the new share bikes, Devine has upped a gear. Not only are the bikes a nuisance and a waste, they also might well have bombs on board, because, she claims,
unattended bicycles have previously been used as bombs in a large number of terrorist attacks.
A large number of terror attacks? So where did she get this tip? Well, straight out of a press release from a Sydney security firm, aptly named Calamity Monitoring, which warned,
share bike schemes may lead to bike bombs being used by terrorists.
The hollow frame and pannier of a bike provides substantial space for explosives and shrapnel to be packed, and the metal bicycle itself adds further fragmentation, which could cause injury.
Explosives inside the bike frame. Frightening stuff. And Devine then had CEO Daniel Lukowitz, who does not appear to have particular expertise in terror attacks, pointing out the irony.
That councils are deploying concrete barriers to protect people against terrorist attacks, while
embracing a scheme that could allow terrorists to easily leave improvised explosive devices lying around the CBD.
So, was this emerging security threat covered widely in the media? No, Miranda had a scoop. And why? Well, as Mike Carmody, former Chief of Security at Federal Airports Corporation, told MediaWatch,
there are far more effective and certainly more easier methods to conduct a terrorist attack. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, everything's a possibility, but if I was to rate it as a threat, it would be well down the list.
Now, it is true that bikes have been used in a handful of terrorism incidents in the past. Lukowitz cites a 2008 attack in the Indian city of Jaipur, where 9 bikes were used to kill more than 60 people. But those involved bombs strapped to bicycles, not hidden inside the frame. And the authors of this 2016 book, Playing by the Rules, could find no evidence of a bicycle itself being turned into a bomb, prompting them to ask,
must the authorities now guard against absolutely everything, no matter how improbable it might be? Think of the sheer number of things we would have to ban near important public buildings if we based our security on incidents that might have caused death or injury in the past. Underpants for a start.
You may have forgotten the famous underwear bomber, who did not explode on a flight to Detroit in 2009. Other things we'd need to ban would be trucks, cars, buckets, backpacks, shopping bags, the list goes on. But, getting back to bike bombs, security expert Neil Fergus of Intelligent Risks sums it up by saying,
there are plenty of other ways of developing an improvised explosive device without taking on the challenge of putting it in a bike frame.
Indeed. And New South Wales Police don't seem to have it on their radar either. But, luckily, Miranda Devine is alert and alarmed on our behalf. And finally, here's a taste of a special programme we're planning next week on how the Russians used Facebook to help swing the US election and divide America.
Tonight, Facebook revealing that 80,000 posts from Russian-backed Facebook accounts reached potentially a third of all Americans between 2015 and 2017.
Last week, after repeated denials, Facebook finally fessed up to the scale of Russia's social media meddling. And it goes far beyond fake news. As the House Intelligence Committee confirmed, Russian troll factories created thousands of Facebook ads and posts to create division and widen conflict on guns, gays, Muslims, and even Texas. So, did it succeed? And how on earth did they get away with it?
American political ads and Russian money, rubles. How could you not connect those two dots?
And that is a truly amazing story, which will be a special edition of MediaWatch next week. In the meantime, you can read more about tonight's stories on our Facebook page or our website, and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. And make sure not to miss Media Bites every Thursday. But for now, until next week, that's it from us. Goodbye.